Welcome to the Death, Taxes and Change podcast, the podcast where the certain things in life are not as certain as you may think. And it's a good and fun conversation that we're going to have today, discussing the recent election results as they come in live and as the IEC is wrapping up its counting of the last few voting districts. And with me in the studio is Hermann Pretorius today. Welcome, Hermann.
Good evening, Daniel. It's thanks for having me on. I must say, what a time to have a conversation. I think I've experienced every possible emotion over the last week or so, trying to understand what the polls are telling us, trying to understand where the parties are focusing what. And to be completely honest, we have to look at this election and wonder whether anyone other than the Freedom Front Plus achieved anything. The ANC will be disappointed that they dipped below 60%. The EFF will be disappointed that they didn't reach the 12, 13, or even higher that they were aiming for. And then, of course, there's the Democratic Alliance, who, I think they are just grateful that the Western Cape voted the way it did, because honestly, it's from their perspective, it's a challenging night, and I think the party, as Helen Zille and Tony Leon already said on Twitter today, that they some introspection, some investigation, some sort of review. I don't want to call it a post-mortem, because the patient might yet, still be alive, but definitely
barely alive.
Well, yes. Well, the Western Cape, I must say, that is the 55% or so that they garnered there, was, I think, as good as they could have hoped for. But so as Tony Leon and Helen Zille said on Twitter, and other people echoed these sentiments, the DA is going to have to look inwards. And sadly, I think, Daniel, or any of our listeners have been, on Twitter at all, there was an upsetting trend of almost voter blaming. Especially the idea that, oh, wonderful, we have now gotten rid of those pesky white voters who actually feel at home in the Freedom Front Plus. Now we can grow the party. And that does raise serious questions about, one South Africa for all, except those people who want to vote for the Freedom Front Plus. And this isn't new. The idea of blaming the voter, the government wanting to elect a new electorate, or the governing parties in whatever capacity on the levels of government. But it's not a completely new phenomenon in politics, but it is, I think, an irresponsible phenomenon. If we look back at, for example, at the 2015 general election in the UK, the former Labour leader Neil Kinnock, the Welsh windbag, he said the voter made a mistake. The voter, the electorate chose the wrong party and they didn't understand. And that's all well and good. I mean, I'm sure there are things that the electorate doesn't understand. I mean, they are, by definition, the sum total of your nation's knowledge and experience. And that knowledge and experience on matters of policy or economics or whatever isn't spread evenly over the population. So, of course, the voter will be ignorant to a certain extent. But for a political party, to blame the voter, I think, is irresponsible. I think, honestly, the Democratic Alliance might be risking losing voters permanently because of this knee-jerk reaction, this blame game, considering the Freedom Front Plus's growth.
Well, what's just so shocking to me is the DA was quite happy in 2014 to get that 2% of voters that voted for the Freedom Front Plus.
Or in 1999.
Or 1999, exactly.
The former NNP voters.
Exactly. And now suddenly they're saying, no, it's a cleansing of the party. But what I do think it's indicative of, perhaps, is the fact that the fact that people are celebrating these white voters leaving the DA. It might point to some internal shift, which I think we're all quite aware of the DA, and that
internal friction,
friction at least, yes, because I think we're all really aware of the fact that there is a very strong contingent of classical liberals still in the DA that are still fighting the good fight there.
Yeah.
But it's like you say, there's this friction between the two groupings or the factions within the party.
But the interesting thing is, I think to say that there are only two factions in the DA I don't think that's completely accurate, because you have, I think if we're going to look at classical liberalism, there's definitely a faction there. There's even recently, in recent years, at least I think, a libertarian instinct that has developed. And that instinct today received some proper criticism from people. Well, I say proper, but I mean, what I mean with that is very targeted criticism at the libertarianism. I think it was Ryan Coetzee who tweeted out, I think it was 13 or so tweets diagnosing what had happened. And it's a really, really decent Twitter thread. You can really check it out. But in it, he addresses several factional questions, and he refers to this libertarian presence in the DA. So I think you've got the libertarians, I think you've got the classical liberals, I think you've got the social democrats, the more, Barack Obama kind of center left-ish. I think something like the capable state is classically part of your social democrat parlance, and but I mean that's open for interpretation. And then I think you've got the progressives, the liberal progressives, and perhaps even some influence of not far left, but definitely not center left element, especially when it comes to social matters, LGBTQ rights, intersectionality, those kind of things. That's very much a factor in the DA's makeup. So it's not just, I think, there's what I think Adrian Basson, what the Bruma boys and the laptop boys. Yeah. I don't think that's a nuanced analysis of the party. But of course, pay credit where credit is due. I don't think Basson was trying to give a full summation of all the ideological strains of the party. I think he was just speaking about where the vying for the leadership of the party lies, and possibly that would be between the classical liberals and the social democrats. And the introspection, I think, will have to look at a wide range of issues. How the DA fought this campaign. Ironically, I think it was a pretty good campaign. I think the ads were high quality. They were catchy. They spoke to specific issues quite colorfully. I think personally, the billboard that they unveiled, the ANC is killing us, I think was actually a brilliant piece of political campaign theater. It hijacked the conversation for quite a few days, quite a few news cycles. So I think mechanistically, their campaign did well.
But what went wrong?
Well, that's I think where the introspection comes in. I think it would be very easy for someone like me who has voted DA before and voted DA this time around to have Solly Msimanga as the Premier of Gauteng. I think it'll be very easy for me to diagnose the problem exactly as I want it to be. I think it would be very easy to say, that's what happens when you don't have classical liberalism at the forefront of the good fight. The voters aren't interested. All pundits and politicians and people with political interests always reach the conclusion that their ideology is the remedy. So I think while we can definitely discuss whether the marginalization of classical liberalism in recent years was one of the big contributing factors, whether it was a factor at all, that is definitely something we should discuss. And I think you and I will agree on that point. Perhaps we should try, devil's advocating it a bit. But yeah, it's a complex issue. It really is. If you look at the township vote, that fell in Shoshanguve, in Mamelodi. It fell by 2-3 percentage points from the high mark of 2016 through the bench. It wasn't a specific fall in a specific region. It was everywhere. The DA in townships that they really need to grow in and make inroads in, they lost 1, 2, 3%.
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at the 2014 national election results, where the DA got 30% of the votes, or almost 31% of the votes in Gauteng, and now in this election, when you look in 2019, they're sitting at 27%. I mean, it's a massive, and especially if you consider that with the municipal elections in 2016, we thought they were going to do superbly well in Gauteng. But that being said, Gauteng is only about 80% in counting of the votes. We still have 20% of the voting districts to be counted, and the ANC is still on the edge of 50%. They have dipped below 50% quite a few times during the past few days, but at the moment they're on 50%, just above 50%, 50.86. So the possibility is still there. It could still happen. I've heard some rumors from people who are part of, I don't think they're part of the people who switched over from the DA to the Freedom Front Plus, but people within the Freedom Front Plus who say that if the ANC dips below 50%, there might be an unusual ANC Freedom Front Plus coalition in Gauteng, which I think would be quite funny and also reminiscent of 1994, perhaps. But
reminiscent. Well, I honestly, if I see an ANC Freedom Front Plus coalition, I would, try and find some shears to nip the wings of the pigs. If that happens, Dr. Groenewald has, you can't fight a campaign on slaan terug, and then after that suddenly say, okay, gee drukkies, or let's embrace. So I think politically that's very unrealistic. However, interestingly, it does fall into this narrative of the nationalist vote, the vote consolidated to 2 points of nationalism, Afrikaner nationalism,
with the middle falling apart at the moment.
Yes. And the DA being the victim of that. And Mr. Maimane even himself said it's clear that the vote divided itself into the nationalists and the One South Africa for All. And interesting that Mr. Maimane, even in that illustration or discussion or labeling of what he perceived to have happened, he gives the one point, the point of convergence. He gives an ideological banner. He says they're nationalists. The nationalists consolidated their vote. But then when he wants to say what happened to the DA, he doesn't give it an ideological label. He says the Party for One South Africa for All. Now, I appreciate the sentiment. I think the sentiment is a valuable sentiment. One South Africa for All is something worth fighting for and worth striving for. But it's not an ideology. It's not, I think, a banner under which voters really can unite, because the question often in politics isn't what do you want to achieve, it's how are you going to achieve it. And we've heard it from several people, Gareth van Onselen, Ryan Coetzee, the ideological question marks over the DA is definitely something that went wrong.
Can we agree, Hermann, that the support that the Freedom Front Plus gained during this election, I would say and argue, has not really a lot to do with the Freedom Front Plus having a wonderful campaign or building up perfectly for the 2019 election, but I would say that it really has to do with the DA to a very large extent. I don't want to say chasing away these voters, but yeah, and that's what it boils down to. They had these voters and people supporting them, and they've lost it since 2014. What do you think?
Credit where credit is due. I think that is something I'm going to say repeatedly. So if there's any drinking
except
games
about
happening,
the EFF, we won't be saying.
No, I think credit where credit is due, even there, at least on a campaigning level. So if someone is turning this into a drinking game, happy shots for each time I say credit where credit is due. But did the Freedom Front Plus, plagiarize is a strong word, but expropriate without compensation the 1999 election slogan of the Democratic Party? Yes, they did. Did they position themselves as a reactionary, forceful voice for minority interests? Yes, they did. Both of those things are true. But I think the real thing that they got right, that the Freedom Front Plus got right, was spotting the gap. I think it became clear at some point during the last 2 years that there was discord within at least the DA electorate, and I think it was quite politically astute for Dr. Groenewald, or as I like to call him, Pieter die Tweede. He spotted that gap. The Freedom Front Plus spotted that gap, and they absolutely went for it. Now, you mentioned earlier that the DA was very happy to have the Freedom Front Plus's votes, or this 2% or whatever, in 2014, 2016, and it's a bit disingenuous to try and spin the loss of a crucial percentage of the vote as some positive for your party. But I think one thing we should also that's not Daniel. That's
sorry. That's what happens when you record at home over the weekend.
Yes. Oh, it's a nice dog. I lost my train. Oh, yes, the voters who shifted from the DA to the Freedom Front Plus. I think it is not easy to say that these were white Afrikaner nationalists, as the case is being made. I don't think these voters are particularly racist. I don't think there's any evidence that they are unhappy with, having a black leader of the party. I genuinely think it is. It's a question of why is the election campaign the only time here in the last week or two that we heard anything about something like language and education rights from Mmusi Maimane. And I'm not saying personally I want to
having
hear
political
more.
Debates between the DA members and the Freedom Front Plus members,
but
just in the week before.
Yes, exactly. When they realized that they needed the Afrikaner vote, and I'm not saying necessarily that is right or that is objectively true. But if you are an white Afrikaner voter, that is one of their interests. Language rights, the threats, the perceived threats against Afrikaans education, Afrikaans must fall. All that really, it's difficult not to think that the Afrikaans community wanted information from the DA, wanted support from the DA over the past 3 years that they just didn't get. And then the party can't, with complete honesty, blame nationalism, because I know many people who voted Freedom Front Plus who voted DA before, and I would stake my life on them not being racist.
There are quite a few people that I'm aware of that voted Freedom Front Plus that are staunch liberals in the proper sense of the word. They're absolute liberals, and a lot of them said the reason they voted Freedom Front Plus is there are a few key issues that they truly believe in. One of them being free speech, the other being property rights, and they just said that the DA, to them at least, are on wonky grounds on those. Not I don't think necessarily on property rights, I would agree with them, but on speech, to a lot of them, it's super important, and they went with that. And these are people who aren't Afrikaans speaking, which is and I know it's an anecdotal example, but I think it's telling to a certain extent, especially in the circles in which I am. It's these are the traditional DA voters. These are people who were part of the DA Young Leaders Program. There were people who've been voting DA for years. There were people who voted DA in 2016 in the municipal elections. And now suddenly they gave away their national vote for different parties. I think a lot of them still voted provincially, especially people in Gauteng, Gauteng and the Western Cape. I do believe these people still gave their votes to the DA. But I think it is telling, and it says a lot about the party. And I think I agree with you, as the party really does need to go do some serious introspection. But Hermann, perhaps just moving to a separate...
I just want to
just one last thing.
One last thing. You say that perhaps you could disagree with the claim that the DA wasn't completely clear on expropriation without compensation, property rights.
No, I think it's quite clear that they were. No, I'm talking about speech was the one, perhaps the possible way.
Because I think they were just unclear enough for people who are passionately against
speech or with expropriation,
property rights. Because if you remember, shortly after the National Assembly voted in favor of starting this whole process, Phumzile van Dam tweeted, or someone tweeted in the line of, congratulations, DA standing up for property rights, saying no to expropriation without compensation. And then Phumzile van Dam replied saying, no, it's not that we're against expropriation without compensation.
I remember that.
It's that we don't want to amend the constitution. And I mean, if you are an Afrikaans voter or even a middle-class voter with property rights, and your kids' inheritance, security for agricultural activity in terms of getting funds, that sends a shiver down your spine.
Yeah, and I mean, when they had the public participation process and there were people coming to make representations to the committee, the Section 25 committee, sorry about that. And what happened is when Adam Snoes was there, I mean, he's a divisive figure to a lot of people. I mean, and let's be brutally honest, and I know Adams really well, but when he came there, he had a very particular plan and he tried to achieve this plan, and I think he achieved what he set out to achieve. But then Glynis Breitenbach, who's also, I think, a staunch liberal and a really hardworking DA member of parliament, said after his speech that she does not agree with a single thing that Adams just said. And I mean, the point is, she could have said she doesn't agree with how he approached it. She could have said she doesn't agree with his bombastic nature in parliament or whatever. But saying that you don't agree with a single thing the person has just said, and you're saying that about a representative who's, well, firstly, one of the chiefs at one of the biggest civil rights organizations in the country,
the biggest one in Africa,
and an organization that are really clearly against expropriation. Now you're coming as a party who supposedly says you're against expropriation, but you say you don't agree with a single thing these people are saying. I mean, what it probably was a slip of the tongue. Probably it was maybe emotional. I'm not sure, but they said it. Steve Swart of the ACDP said it exact same thing. He later apologized, and he personally came to AfriForum, to their offices, and spoke to them afterward, tried to mend some bridges. But the point is, it says a lot about the DA, and it says about, I almost want to say, not having a clear message or a clear plan.
Absolutely, I think that's that. It's not. I don't think it was a slip of the tongue. When you are, I think, one of the most experienced prosecutors in the country, you don't have a slip of the tongue of that magnitude where you abandon a key policy, or at least rhetorically abandon it. It was deliberate political positioning. And now, to be fair, it would have been toxic to some voters, especially black voters, some black voters, not all, but I'm a large majority, if the DA were to align themselves with AfriForum. Politically, I think that would have been risky.
Yes.
But that's the conundrum that the DA faces, is you can't be all things to all people.
Yes.
You have to, at some point, you have to get off the fence. And people wanted them to get off the fence in different ways, and they just never did.
I can't remember. Today I saw a tweet, but I can't remember who tweeted it. He said that there's no problem in being a broad church, especially in South Africa with the diverse country we have. You can be a broad church political party. But he said that the issue is the DA is not debating on whether or not it should be a broad church. It's still deciding on which religion it's part of.
Yeah, who said
And
that?
I can't remember, but the point is, I think it's so true. Is the DA
Wasn't
does
it
not.
Marius Rood?
Yes, it was Marius Rood.
Of the
Yes, of the
IRR,
IRR, the shadow DA.
Yeah.
But
Or
it's such a
the
good point.
Volksstaat government in exile, however you want to
Yes,
look at it. I mean,
those
the
damn
far
English
rights.
liberals at the IRR,
Yeah,
their
the-
full
and-
start.
Yeah, but it's they are far right. They are very very far right.
But the point is, I think it's such a, it's true. I mean, there are a lot of organizations, even the EFF to a very big extent are also broad church. They have a massive variety of different people with different opinions in their
Yeah,
party.
they have all flavors of opportunism.
And of Marxism. But no, the point is they do. And even if you just think about it, the EFF started out as a workers' party. I mean, that's their roots. They said they're these low-class workers, and they started this party. But the point is, they have what they refer to as the intelligentsia. They have these university students. They have these academics, these middle-class people who drive around in their Hondas, but love preaching Marxism. Exactly.
From the Honda. They
Yes,
just
and while they sip their skinny lattes from Starbucks. But the point being, the EFF also has a variety of people in there, diverse group of people in there, and they sort of managed to pull it off because I feel they've managed to pull it off because they have a clear message. What the position of the EFF is on a lot of issues.
Actually, it's interesting that you say that, because they flip-flopped, I think, more than any other party within the last 2 years.
On what issues?
Praveen Gordhan for him.
That's on people that do that the whole time.
People. And also, I mean, Julius Malema, he's a bit Trumpian in a sense that he seems to make up policies at rallies. I mean, what was that idiotic idea of having a raffle for jobs, or what was it?
Yes, for the wasn't the Youth Development Agency raffle thing?
Yeah, I mean, this random selection thing, and honestly, what kind of nonsense policy is that? But where the EFF is successful is on policy. And I think this is the clash between, or the difference between the DA and the EFF. The DA is clear on policy mechanisms, but unclear on ideology. And the EFF is unclear on policy mechanisms, but clear on ideology.
I agree.
And that's voters appreciate that. I think that.
Hermann, perhaps moving over to one of the other opposition parties, and the party that we did keep a fine eye on, the ZACP, the Purple Cow Party. You also tweeted recently that you didn't vote for them, but it's sad for you to see what happened. It's especially concerning, not concerning to you, but just how people are reacting to the news that they didn't get their seat that they wanted in the end. What do you think went wrong for the Purple Cow? They started too late. So you can't run a campaign just on social media in South Africa.
I think, to be honest, all of those factors, and I think the yapping and the criticism going now to the ZACP. I mean, that's expected. That's to be expected. So I don't think people should get too sad about what people are being mean about purple cows. That happens. That's politics for you. Where they fundamentally went wrong, I genuinely can't say. But what I know is that voters do not like risks. Voters very rarely take risks in terms of change, or a risk in a direction of change, when they are faced with the crisis that, or the several crises that the country face. The Freedom Front Plus is, I think, more of a risk from that perspective than the DA, but it's an established party. It has a legacy back to 1994 with Constant Viljoen. So it's not as risky to shift to that. But the ZACP is a completely untested entity.
But if we also just consider the fact that how many registered voters were there, I mean, it's what?
26
million, yeah.
something.
They did not reach even a quarter of all those people. I would
be
doubt
surprised if they reached 1 million.
Yes, of people knowing about the ZACP. And that's, I think, the challenge when you, well, firstly, start your campaign quite late. And secondly, when you try to base it on social media. I mean, we've seen social media work quite well for certain figures throughout the world. But in South Africa, we do still have quite a traditional approach to politics. People like you knocking on the door. They like posters. They like visibly seeing parties. And again, I think it brings trust to a lot of voters. They see these people here and then they trust them more to vote for them and give their vote for them.
The one thing that the internet will always have that traditional campaigning will not have is the echo chamber effect. If you're out on the doorstep, it's very, very difficult just to, interact with the voters that automatically slant in your direction. On the internet, however, that is what naturally happens, is you get embroiled in the circles that you vaguely move in. It's like points of gravity. So the lack of a traditional campaign infrastructure did cost them dearly, but 12,000 votes for such an untried concept, such a Marmite concept almost. You love it or you hate it. I don't think that's too bad.
No, they did. If you think about it, 12,000 votes in 6 weeks, it really isn't bad. But then
it's
obviously
up to 13,500 now. I see.
Yeah, so 13,000 votes, they got that, and I think it's something to build on. I think that will be the big test for the ZACP, is how do they, go from here, and what do they do from here?
Definitely, and this actually brings me to a point that I think goes back to the DA, but we don't have to go back to that discussion because I think you can delve for hours into that. But on election day, Kanthan Pillay, the leader of the ZACP, tweeted something, and Jack Bloom of the DA replied saying, yeah, this party won't get a seat, or don't waste your vote on a party that won't get a seat, something along those lines, which I think a fair interpretation of the tweet would be to say it was snide. And then Kanthan Pillay just replied, okay, well, then I'm not going to vote DA provincially. So this issue of ballot splitting and voting for one party nationally with voting for another one provincially, if you look at the Gauteng results for the Democratic Alliance on the national ballot and for the Gauteng results on the provincial ballot, you get a substantial percentage point difference between the two. So I think we've seen vote splitting in this election on a larger scale than we've ever had in South Africa. And the ambition of the ZACP was to establish vote splitting as a principle. They only stood on the national ballot. And that also counted against them. I don't think people are quite clued in to, the national ballots, the provincial ballots, the 200 national seats, the 200 regional seats. So that also cost the ZACP. But they might have started, this election might have genuinely started an evolution of ballot splitting, where people voted for two parties on the different levels.
Hermann, let's perhaps have a look at the composition of the National Assembly as it stands now at this point. I think we're at 90.
As it anticipated to stand.
Yes, we are 95% of voting districts have been counted. So if you firstly look at it, the ANC have gone from 2014 249 seats to 231, which is, I think we all expected. They did lose a bit. I don't think they lost as many as we thought they would. But they have gone down, but so too has the DA, who've moved from 89 to 84. So they've lost 5 seats. And then obviously the one of the big gainers was the EFF. They went from 25 seats to 42 seats. And the Inkatha Freedom Party went from 10 to 15 seats, which I think not a lot of focus has been placed on, actually. And
Yes, that's true.
not a lot of people have been talking about the fact that the Inkatha Freedom Party have grown considerably.
A bit of a, resurrection.
Yes, especially in KZN, where most of their votes was. And then the Freedom Front Plus went from 4 seats to 10 seats, which a lot of people...
Oh, that's better than I expected.
Yes.
I think it's better than they expected.
They were hoping for 8, apparently.
Yeah,
they were hoping for 8 seats. But the concerning thing is if you count all of these votes together and you look at all the parties and the positions they took with the fifth parliament of South Africa, is that the total percentage of parties who support expropriation without compensation sits at nearly 70%. So if you just combine the ANC and the EFF together, just and those two parties, well, the IFP they're quite...
They voted in favor of the constitutional amendment in the first National Assembly vote.
Yes, but then they voted against the adoption of the Section 25 committee report, didn't they? Or they abstained, I think.
I'm not quite sure, but I must say, I was about a year ago, I was looking at the IFP as a possible destination for my vote, but I mean that vote just killed any chance of me voting.
I mean, if you just look just at the EFF and the ANC, it's already it's 68%. I mean, it's a really comfortable 2/3 majority.
Yeah, it's for someone like myself or like you, it's deeply distressing that the fundamental, it's what's torong in English. The tapestry of our constitutional dispensation is starting to fray because of this populist majority for expropriation without compensation, and we're going to sit with the consequences of that for a long time. And that's one of the issues I actually really frustrated me during this election campaign, is the vote for Cyril idea.
The idea that even FW de Klerk said, I think the day or two before the election, he said, if Cyril does what he says he'll do, then Cyril's a good bet.
Which is awful. If Cyril does what the manifesto says the ANC is going to do,
we're screwed.
That's putting it nicely. So I know of white middle class people who looked at Cyril. Remember, I think just when Cyril became president in February last year, there was this meme going around of find someone who looks at you like the white middle class looks at Cyril Ramaphosa. And that was
jogging at Groenpunt.
Yes, and that was before any controversial, things. That was in the very honeymoon period. But this vote for Cyril idea is one of the silliest ideas I have ever encountered in politics of any kind. It is worse than the small parties don't matter spiel that the bigger parties always bring out during elections. It is absurd. The whole idea of our system, of our electoral system, is the voter doesn't elect the president. We elect a National Assembly and a National Council of Provinces. We vote for parties. So you can't give Cyril a mandate, because every inch of the mandate you give him, David Mabuza gets exactly that same,
the exact same party that had Jacob Zuma in it. It's the same party, the same principles.
And the idea that a vote for Cyril is something worthwhile is it was a good campaign approach by the ANC. Cyril Ramaphosa was their greatest electoral asset in this campaign, and he managed to deliver, I think, a good 4 or 5 percentage points just by him being Cyril Ramaphosa.
So, if we look at some of the provincial legislators, there are quite a few places where it's still quite close, and then obviously somewhere it was close, but the voting is finished. So obviously we all know about Gauteng being a battleground province, but what I've just noticed is KwaZulu-Natal was quite close, and not a lot of attention was placed on it, and so they're still at 95% counted, and the ANC are on 53%, they're gaining to 54% side, but that wasn't really something that was said before the election. People were talking more about Gauteng, the Northern Cape, being the two provinces that might swing. But again, it shows an interesting shift. It is in line with what happened in 2016, where the IFP did do relatively well. They did gain a few wards where they previously didn't. Yes, exactly. So I don't know if this is a trend that may perhaps last. We'll see with the next municipal election how it goes. But I think it can be a good thing. A strong IFP in KwaZulu-Natal trying to wrangle some support from the ANC there would be good, generally speaking.
Yes. However, the Institute for Race Relations, I think, was it in the final poll on the 6th or the one just the week before? In one of their two final criterion reports, if I remember correctly, they polled KwaZulu-Natal and had the ANC under 50%. So the Institute for Race Relations, I think, I don't know how, I'm not a statistician, I don't know how they decided to poll KwaZulu-Natal. I wouldn't have expected that. But the fact that it was a toss-up province, or could have been a toss-up province, yes, that is something that very few people expected, outside of, I think, a few, statisticians. And it's also something the media, not much attention has been paid to it in the aftermath of these elections. But a week or two before the election, the DA's chief campaign strategist, Jonathan Mokes, reiterated with some measure of confidence the 4 goals of the Democratic Alliance: to retain the Western Cape with an outright majority, to grow nationally beyond the 22% they got last time, to get the ANC below 50% in Gauteng, and to get the ANC below 50% in the Northern Cape. They achieved one of those 4.
And nearly a second.
Which one?
The Gauteng one.
No, can I honestly tell you why I don't think that is? If the ANC goes below 50%, it won't be the DA's work. It will be the EFF. It wasn't if the ANC, I highly doubt they're going to lose Gauteng at this stage. I really think that trend of just above 50% it's been holding firm. But the EFF would be the party that loses, or that ensures the ANC losing the province. And if that happens, the EFF has a tailor-made excuse for working with the ANC. They can say, we cannot work with a party that lost support nationally, that lost support in this province. The voters rejected the Democratic Alliance. It would be anti-revolutionary for the EFF. It would be anti-democratic for the EFF to be working with the DA. They will either go into coalition with the ANC or do exactly the same to Gauteng what they did to Tshwane and Johannesburg, a confidence and supply arrangement. So even if the ANC at this late stage dips below 50%, the Democratic Alliance, I think, has lost the impetus. It has lost the momentum in the province to even have a claim on forming the government.
It's interesting that you say this now, that the fact that the ANC lost so much support, or not so much, but lost support in Gauteng between the two national elections, is down to the EFF. Because if you look at it, in 2014, they received about 10% of the vote in Gauteng, the EFF. And in 2019, as we're standing now, they've gone to 14%. So that's a 4% jump that they've received.
And isn't that the 4%
that the ANC lost? The ANC lost just a little bit less than 4%. But interestingly, the DA lost about 4%, about 3%, almost 4% themselves. And
on the national or the provincial ballot?
So this is on the provincial ballot.
Because on the national one, they lost even more.
Even more. And so, but interestingly, the Freedom Front Plus gained about 2.5% from 2014, and that's from where the DA came. It probably came from the DA. So, and then I think there might have been a few ANC people going to the DA in Gauteng.
I highly doubt that.
But surely the fact that Tshwane and Johannesburg have been run decently during the past few years has to have had some influence on people voting.
I think so, yes. There was some influence, but I don't think statistically significant influence. I think the DA was banking on a statistically significant, payout of good governance, especially turning around the debt situation, Hermann Pretorius' housing push and stuff like that. But that didn't happen. I think the assumptions were made about the levels of local support that just the results didn't bear them out.
Well, if you look at the national ballot percentages in Tshwane, the ANC got 53.48%, the DA 22%, and then in Johannesburg in this election now, just now, and
terrible plunge,
and exactly the same in Joburg, or relatively the same. So they didn't really receive the support they received in the municipal elections, and I think that again points to the fact that municipal elections and national elections are, as we say in Afrikaans, 'n perd van 'n ander kleur. They completely
of a different color.
Yes, it's not the same type of election, and it isn't. People don't vote the same way. Although I have to say again, it's an anecdotal example, but this week, today actually, I spoke to a colleague of mine who said that he spoke to two different sets of people, and on the one hand, the people said, when they got to the ballot box, they were like, why are there two ballots? They don't understand this. And people just aren't aware of the fact that they're voting provincially and nationally. And then the second group of people that he spoke to later during the day, they said, actually, those are a few weeks, I think 2 weeks before the election, they said, they can't wait to vote for the IFP, so they can have an IFP mayor.
And wasn't it Nelson Mandela's grandson or something?
He said he's going to vote for the BLF in the Western Cape.
They weren't even on the Western Cape ballot.
Yes, exactly. So again, I think there's a lot of civic education that needs to take place in South Africa. It's something that I truly admire of the states. The USA really does place a lot of emphasis on civic education, and I don't think it's perfect to a large extent. I think there are a lot of people who don't understand exactly how the electoral system works and how the electoral college works, and even just how state. Sorry, Hillary Clinton, yes, and even how a lot of the states work. I mean, we don't even know exactly how each and every state works in the United States, but they do put in a lot of effort, and I really do think we can try to do the same. And it can't just be left to life orientation teachers in high school.
Yeah, who themselves probably don't have far superior knowledge than the kids they are teaching. No, that's absolutely true. The civic knowledge of one thing. Let me. This is a story that I remember from registration weekend, 26, 27 January. It was, I think I remember correctly, it was in the Diepsloot area. During that final registration weekend, the IEC faced difficulties with protests and service delivery protests and stuff like that. And I remember there was one ward councillor in Diepsloot who said to his constituents, you don't have service delivery because the IEC didn't demarcate this ward, your constituency, for service delivery. And not only did that, appall me as someone with appreciation for the, democratic process, it was highly, highly, highly upsetting that the electorate would just accept that.
Yes.
And not even know that this is a national election. The IEC has nothing to do with service delivery or governance. And that is it's a knowledge deficit that is costing this country very dearly. I mean, in the other day in the Times, it was reported that some KwaZulu-Natal voters had to be informed that Jacob Zuma isn't president anymore. So when it comes to civic education, I mean that we've got miles to travel.
And perhaps to wrap up today's conversation in the stream, post this election, what do we expect? I mean, I think they're going to, well, firstly, we all know the power is probably going to go off quite soon.
Yeah,
but,
stock up on candles.
But what do we expect? I expect the EWC process to get a lot of new momentum. It's definitely going to steam ahead, which is concerning and absolutely frightening. And I really would try to encourage all people to do whatever they can to try to stop this. Speak to who you can, write who you can, participate as you can, but
take out membership of organizations that oppose
exactly
EWC.
Exactly, and I mean, yeah, I expect dark times if EWC goes through, and I don't think it's being really pessimistic. I think we have a wonderful example. Well, we have examples all over the world of what happens when property rights are eroded, like the ANC and the EFF want to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't think it would be alarmist to say that this will really develop into a crisis within the foreseeable future, and that the only recourse is through the courts, and that worries me even more because we've already seen ANC assaults on the judiciary. I don't think those are going to stop just because Cyril Ramaphosa is nicer than Jacob Zuma, or he doesn't have legal problems of that scale. Because we should just remember very clearly that not one ANC president in the history of this country ever served their 2 full terms in office. They were always succeeded by their deputy. Of course, you can argue that Motlanthe didn't have Zuma as a deputy, but Zuma was Mbeki's deputy, and Motlanthe just filled out the Mbeki term. So the ANC isn't going to change. I think they're going to be emboldened. They're going to try and win back the EFF. That'll accelerate EWC. I think ESCOM, the power cuts thing is serious. I think they've been on, not even life support, but I think afterlife support to keep the lights on before the election. And then the other thing that is absolutely going to happen is I think the DA is going to have a very public fallout. I don't, in fact, see how they can avoid that. So yeah, those are the things I'm expecting. I'm seeing in the
I think the DA fallout is going to be quite interesting, and how the party deals with the results is going to be quite interesting. Because I like you said, they had their 4 goals that they set for themselves, and they didn't achieve it. And I think a lot of people were hoping that they would. I think a lot of people who have been voting for the DA during the past few years
with a firm confidence.
Yes, with a really firm confidence in the party, are going to be really disappointed. And I think a lot of people place their hopes for South Africa on the DA to a very large extent. I've seen a lot of people on social media saying this is the last election they're voting in. Not because they're not going to vote ever again, because they're leaving South Africa. And then, interestingly enough, it's not white South Africans. It's not those people who defected to the Freedom Front Plus who are leaving South Africa. It's black middle class South Africans who are leaving South Africa more than white South Africans. So, and it's concerning. It
is concerning, and even adding to that point of a loss of confidence in the country. The 65% turnout rate is it's a dangerous fall. So yeah, no, it's there's going to be a rude awakening of some kind somewhere, and the best thing one can say is that I don't want to sound like Littlefinger from Game of Thrones, but crisis is a ladder. From this disaster, you have to find a solution outwards. The Democratic Party must learn that the Democratic Lions must learn that they aren't entitled to the vote, to anyone's vote. The ANC will do whatever the ANC does, but it's going to be, I think, painful for many South Africans, politically, economically, and socially.
Perhaps just a last point of conversation, Hermann. The allegations of irregularities during this election, we've seen the smaller parties, I think a few minutes ago, say that they might try to interdict the results of the IC that they were going to announce. What do you make of it? Do you think these are serious allegations, or do you just think these are sour grapes and people who are very disappointed in their showing in the election?
I think it could be both. If you're not opportunistic in politics, you're doing it wrong. So the fact that the confidence in the IEC has definitely declined this time around is worrying. The stories of double voting,
which some, Daniël Eloff said,
yes, openly, that
on
the
TV.
EFF participated in double voting schemes to test the system. Now, that's to commit a crime with an honest motivation or a pure motivation doesn't negate the fact that it's a crime. But the IEC really has, I think it has to do two things between now and 2021. That is restore confidence in itself to be able to handle these elections. They must place pressure on amending the Electoral Act so that voters cannot vote outside of the district they are registered in. And then there has to be a huge push of civic education that I think the IEC is best positioned to lead.
No, I completely agree. And we'll see how the next few months play out. We'll definitely, I think, in a few days' time, just as the results are officially announced, have another live stream to perhaps chat just to conclude and wrap up this election, which has in certain ways been shocking and in other ways been really what we expected to happen.
I think the word cathartic might be applicable. This genuinely might trigger some changes.
Well, we hope so. We really do hope so. But for you listeners, thank you for tuning in during this last hour. We truly appreciate it. Be sure to subscribe to the Death, Taxes and Change podcast wherever you get your dose of podcasts. Leave us a review on iTunes and on Castbox. And then you can follow me on social media. I'm quite active on Twitter at DJ Eloff. That's DJ Eloff. And then also my colleague, Hermann Pretorius. He's also quite active and an avid tweeter. Hermann, your Twitter handle is?
Meneer _man. That it's MAN _MANN. No, MEN. Oh, I can't even spell. It's MENEER _MANN.
Double N. It's a weird man. And then you can also follow the Death, Taxes and Change podcast on Twitter. And then obviously the Death, Taxes and Change podcast is proudly brought to you by Pod Media, and we really appreciate